we go. And then what we'll do here is I will need to I will spotlight me for you guys so you can see what I'm doing, I guess. That's how that's going to work. So today I'm going to tie a small streamer intended for going after bass if you don't want to chase them in Elk Lake. So it's basically a woolly bugger with some feathers on the back end and a deer hair head. It's pretty straightforward. The tricky part is trimming the deer hair. So I've got a number 6 by 3x long hook because I need the shank length to put the deer hair on. And I'm going to use an olive 6/0 thread, and I'm going to start about 1/3 of the way down the shank with the thread. I want to leave the front of the shank bare because that will make it easier to spin the deer hair when I put the deer hair on. And I will wind this down to the bend and go right to the bend of the hook. And we do a lot of stuff on the bend of the hook here, so it might get a little bulky there. The tail is Marabou. And I'm just going to take, this is a Marabou Plume, so I'm just going to take a chunk of this, get rid of extraneous stuff. And the tail I'm going to make about shank length. I'll sit that down right where the thread is there at the bend and do a wrap around it. And I'm going to wrap the Marabou up the shank to that 1/3 point again, just a little bit of an underlay. And the only reason I'm doing that is because the chenille I'm going to use for the body is a skinny little chenille, and I want a little more bulk there. And once I get there, the next thing I want to attach is the tail part. And what I have there is I've got feathers from a hackle. It's just a saddle hackle. And they're the barred type. This one's olive. I've also got some that I've done with the gray. The sample I showed you there is a gray one. And I'm going to make these things about, I measure from the eye of the hook to the end of the tail. And then I'll strip back a little bit of the barbs, and I'll tie that right in where the tail ends at the end of the hook, right at the bend again. And I'm tying that so that the hackle kind of curves out. You can see it's got a bit of a curve out. And I'll tie it so the hackle faces the curved side out. The second hackle goes on the other side of the hook, and I'm going to measure for length there. And I will place it on the far side of the hook, right where I started the other one. And I'll tie that down. When I'm done with that, I will try to position it so that it has, it's on right in line with the hook. Trim off the stubs of the 2 hackles. And then I will tie those down on top of all of that. And try and place those hackles so that they splay out either side of the shank of the hook. And I've played with them a little bit before I tied them in to have them so that they kind of swoop up a little bit as well as out to the sides. So you just use your thumbnail and kind of curve the hackle a teeny bit. Next thing I'm going to put in is a bit of wire, if I can find it here. And the wire is when I wind the the next hackle up, I want to ensure that it doesn't get pulled off by the first fish that bites it. So I'm going to take a little bit of fine copper wire here just to bind the stem of the hackle that I'm going to wind up the body down, so that if a fish gets a tooth in there, it's not going to all come unwound. Well, another thing I discovered is if you put a little hook in the end of the wire and then bend the tip of the wire back and wind over that, you don't pull the wire out when you try wrapping it forward. So now I got the wire right on top of the hook shank there. Hold it out of the way with the clip. Then I'm going to tie in the hackle that I'm going to wind up the body as a rib. And that's just a nice fine saddle hackle that I've happened to have a really nice, good black saddle hackle for this that's fairly fine. And I'm going to tie this in so that when I wind it, I want it tied with the cupped side facing me. And I'll put that on top of the hook. Wind it back, my thread back to the back. And I'll clip that out of the way as well. And then keep that clear. And then the body is going to be a fairly fine crystal chenille. And once again, I'll start that about halfway down the shank and wind back over it right back to the back of the fly. So all the material, almost all the material in this fly goes in at the back end. Wind my thread forward to where I've left the bare hook at the front. And I'll tie a half hitch there. Get my bobbin rest out here. And this just makes a few operations easier. So now I will wrap the chenille up the shank of the hook, touching wraps. And this gives a little sparkle and a little thickness to the body. When I get back up to the front again, I don't want to go too far. That's it there, because I want to leave some bare shank in front to tie the deer hair on. So I'll do a couple of wraps in behind that, and a couple of wraps in front, so it stays. So that's the body. And once again, I'm going to make things easier. I do a little half hitch here again and use the bobbin rest. And I will wrap the saddle hackle up the body of the fly in open wraps so that I get, about 5 or 6 or 7 wraps. And then when I get to the very front of the chenille, I'll just do a couple of extra wraps, almost one over top of the other there, just to add a little bulk to that hackle. Wrap in behind, wrap in front. I'm going to make sure that's pushed back because I still want to keep room for putting the deer hair on. I will counter wrap instead of going the same direction. I'm going to counter wrap the wire. And the reason for this, it binds the stem of the saddle hackle down. And you just have to keep wiggling it when you bring it through so you don't compress the hackle up against the shank of the hook. And then when I get to the front, I would get right there, a couple of wraps. And a couple of wraps in front. Get my wire out of there. Then I have this wonderful little thing that protects your fingers. It's a hair packer, and it's a little stub of plastic that's got some holes drilled on the end. And I take the hole, put it over the eye of the hook, and I will use get the smallest hole in there. And I will use it to push back on the hackle and the body as far as I can to pack it backwards. Hold everything back and do a wrap there. And I'll bring my thread up to halfway between where the hackle ends and the eye of the hook. And then for a head, I'm going to use deer hair, dark olive, and I will take a section of deer hair off the back that's about maybe a pencil diameter size of deer hair, and I'll trim it off the hide. My hair stacker, which is this guy here, hold the deer hair by the tips and take a comb and get all the fuzzies out. Otherwise, the deer hair doesn't stack very well. Stick the deer hair into the hat stacker. And then I'll whack it down so that it all the tips go down to the bottom of the stacker. You can see it, the tips are all evened up there. And I'm going to measure sort of a shank length, the amount of deer hair. I don't want a whole pile of deer hair, length of deer hair. Hold it in my thumb and forefinger like that and trim it off about between a quarter and maybe 3/16 in front of my fingers, short. And I will hold that so that it's, put my thread in the middle of that bare shank hook and hold this right over top of the thread. And I'll make a loose wrap over the top, just pull it just enough to flare it a little bit. Then bring the thread up and then push and at the same time tighten the thread around the shank of the hook. And that causes the hair to spin and flare out. And I'll do another wrap through there. Ease all the hair back. Get my fingers in front. Grab my hair packer again. Put that over the eye of the hook and push that stuff back as hard as I can up against the body of the hook. Put my thread in there again, and I just want to make sure that that hair is back as far as I can get it. I'm going to make room for a slightly smaller batch of deer hair in front of that, about half the size of the first one.
Do you want the hackle or the hair tips to form like a collar on this fly, like you do?
You're going to end up cutting those off anyway when you shape the round head. So I just leaving the long ends of the deer hair at the back makes it easier to get your scissors in behind, so you don't clip the hackle on the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will just trim that down a little shorter than the last batch. And pull everything back, put this in there, and spin that in. Once again, back this back. Pull everything back with my fingers and wrap around the front here. Make sure the deer hair is all held back. And then I'll take my whip finisher And I will wrap right behind the eye of the hook. And that's that. Now, I'm not going to spend the entire time trimming hair for you because this takes a little while. But I'll show you the initial start of how to do this so that it works. Take my scissors and I will push the deer hair, stroke the deer hair forward and lay my scissors down right in front of where that black hackle is and keep them forward, tilted forward, sort of straight up and down. And I'll go around the back of this deer hair and trimming almost straight up and down. That's going to take out a lot of the deer hair that is sticking backwards. I'll just go around the fly like that. And that gets the deer hair kind of separated from the hackle. Then I'm going to stroke it forward a bit. And I'll lay my scissors in on the hook at about a 10-degree angle from vertical. And I'll go around and do the same thing. And what this does just creates a little separation between the black hackle of the body and the deer hair. That slight angle. As somebody said, you never know when to stop trimming deer hair. It's always, you always want to nick at it some more. Then I'm going to push it back a bit. And I'll take my scissors and lay them on the eye of the hook at about a 45-degree angle. And I will go around, pull the deer hair back, and I'll go from the eye of the hook at that same angle to separate it out from the eye, so the eye is clear. You can see it takes a bit of fiddling. Now to trim the rest of it, once I've got the front and the back kind of separated, I have this skookum little device made by a company called Stunco. And what you do is you take a standard razor blade and it fits in these little bits at the end. And when you tighten it up, it curves the blade. You can see I've got a curve there.
Yeah, those work real well.
And then what I'll do is I'll just start at the front and I will very gently trim backwards. And try to do that a bit of an angle from the eye of the hook. Again, at about a 45-degree angle back. Because these blades are so sharp and that deer hair is fairly fragile, it's fairly easy to overdo it. You have to be careful not to fire it too much. And then I can come straight back at about the same distance all the way around. And you don't have to do much. It does tend to trim off the deer hair pretty nice with just a little bit of force. And so I'm now what I'm making is a sort of a round ball of deer hair. And the whole purpose of this is that to give it a little bit of a disturbance in the water, because that ball of deer hair is going to push the water around a bit as you strip the fly or as you troll the fly. And you can play with this for hours if you want to take your time with it. But I'm getting pretty close to being done. Just a little bit there. And the last little bit, I've got a couple of little sticky honey bits here. I'm just going to take my scissors and trim them off just to smooth it out. A little bit of a touch there. So that's pretty much him. So looks a little fuzzy, a little ragged, but that's okay. I'm not looking for beauty here, just something that's going to cause some disturbance at the front of the fly.
Yeah.
And that's him. So a bunch of different little techniques just for fun's sake.
It's got kind of that rolled muddler
Yeah, it's very
look to it,
similar.
right? I like it. Looks
Yeah, I
good.
think I think the whole purpose is to create something that's out at Elk Lake. There are perch, believe it or not, and I think you know, a bass might be interested in a small perch. So I have a feeling it might be a good fly to try out at Elk in the weed beds on a sink tip line, maybe. So that's him. And I will go back. I will take my spotlight off here.
Nice, Dave. Are you still able to find those razor blades?
Sure.
Okay.
You might have to, you know, I'm trying to think where the best place the last place I found them is the guys that sell knives in the mall.
Oh, okay.
They sell razors and stuff like that there as well, right?
Okay.
And that might have been the last place I saw them. But you
Okay.
could, I'm sure they're still around.
Yeah, I haven't looked. I mean, when I've been into any of the stores these days, I just see the conventional razor blades that they have now, the 3 and 5 blade ones.
Yeah. Ones that fit the old style of razors.
I think I was able to buy not that long ago at London Drugs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
I lastly bought them at
check
shop.
it out there as well, because they have lots of locations and
Yeah.
you know, there's a good
Tommy Guns at West Shore has them.
yeah.
Ah, okay.
And if you buy them in a package like this,
Yeah.
That
And,
could last you a lifetime.
and I've got at least one more in here. I think maybe two. So they'll and of course you use one side until you're done with it, and then you turn it over.
Yep,
So it's got a double life kind of thing.
exactly. It's like the old double taper lines.
Yeah.
You flip it end for end when you've worn it out.
So here's the same. Whoops. Here's the same fly, but this one is done. Let's see here. This one's done with yellow for the deer hair and gray grizzlies for the sides. And you could probably change the body color as well. So I've tied a raft of them in in experiment. And that all came because what I did, I tied this a couple of years back that has a rabbit strip tail with a tied and shaped deer hair body. It's like a Dalbert diver. It's
The Dalbert divers are awesome.
yeah, but the bass out here are quite small and they don't surface feed in the weeds.
Really?
And they don't seem to.
Huh.
They're like they say that there's smallmouth and they're not very big. So Florin, it's your turn.
Dave.
Yeah.
Here is a different interpretation of a similar idea.
Yeah.
This is a 2-feather streamer with a bit of flash and a bit of a backbone of hair. so what it looks like. You can tie it, like I said, you can do this from small trout sizes to big pike sizes. And today I'm gonna tie the small one, but you can follow the exact same steps and you can do a big fly. And I'm going to explain along the way as well the materials. So to start with, I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do a really small version of this today. So this is a size 12 hook. And it's one of those, whatever, trout bum barbless hooks. It's maybe a little bigger than what we're normally used to seeing as a size 12, but it's relatively long shank. It's pretty sturdy wire. It seems to be a pretty nice hook, and I've been using them for a while, and they do appear to work well. Okay, so thread is just standard black 8/0, and start at the head of the fly. And I prefer, even though it's a streamer and whatever, when you go to pike flies, I prefer to use something a little heavier, like the Danville's 3/0 monocord. That's one of my favorite threads. But for something this small, in order not to add unnecessary bulk to the fly, I just stick to the 8/0. And then the first step is to put a little bit of bucktail here. And you don't want too much. And I like this sort of natural darker tan color that's at the base of the tail. As you can see, this has been quite used up. And the hairs here are fairly short, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And being a bucktail, you get this fine hair. There's not much flair to it when you tie it on. This may be a little bit too uneven. So what you can do is you can stack this in your hand by just grabbing. So all you have to do is grab the long tips and then align them with the rest that was left in your hand. So you get something a little bit more even like this. Okay, and then measure this approximately 1.5 or twice shank length and tie it in here. As you note, I'm somewhere about halfway down the shank. I'm gonna put this on top and do a couple of not very tight wraps and then move forward while tightening the thread a little bit more. So this will keep the hair from flaring, and it'll keep it in place right on top of the shank where I want it. And I have a few bits left here. Okay. So what I want to achieve with this hair, and you can do this in different ways, is to just create a bit of a spine for the fly to keep the materials on their own side of the hook, because most of the stuff here is going to be tied on the side. Now I want to add some flash, and I have some of this, what is it called? Crinkle, whatever. It's a crinkle mirror flash. It's some form of fine and narrow Flashabou. Other stuff I like to use is this Kreinik flash in a tube. What's very nice about this, and is quite different from the previous material I showed, this is very, very soft. Okay, so if you want a lot of action from the flash in the water, this is a nice choice. Another alternative is this polar flash that is also fairly soft, and this one is very, very fine as well. So it's somewhere in between that crinkle flash and the Kreinik stuff. And all of them are a lot softer than your standard crystal flash. So again, it's kind of what kind of effect are you trying to go for? Okay, so let me pick one of these materials. So I'm going to get 2 strands of the stuff. And as is my habit with these things, I fold it. And I hook it over the shank like this. And then I hold this at an angle and catch it with the thread and then pull it down and tighten it up. And what this does is attaches very nicely my strands to the side of the fly. Okay. If I feel I want a little bit more flash, I still have a little bit left in hand. I can put a little bit of flash on top, like so. Attach that. This is gonna come out a little bit flashier this way. Let's see, things are in place here, okay. Just make sure that there's nothing that's out of place before you go to the next step. And then what I'm going to do is I have some prepared hackles that I'm going to use on the sides. And here the choices are mainly from, if you can find these, they're not that easy anymore. These Indian capes. So this is a natural kind of cream color. And you can get pretty nice hackles of this in smaller sizes. So you can see here, these are pretty nice, pretty small, and they have rounded tips. The other alternative are these bugger packs from Whiting. And these ones, so this one, what I have in here, as you can see, it's pretty used up. These are really nice hackles for pike flies. You get something like this is going to make a nice pike fly. And I don't need them any bigger than this. So these are whatever, 3 inches. You can get hackles off these bugger packs that are a lot longer if you like to tie with longer hackles and bigger flies. So these are the 2 main choices. And on the bugger packs, you also get smaller hackles, but they tend to be very pointy. So this is the Whiting bugger pack hackle. Some of the small ones that would fit this size of hook. And these are some of the Indian hackles off that cape that I just showed you. So what I do is I prepare these, I pluck 2 hackles off the cape or off the skin patch from the same spot so that they'll come out already matched if they're adjacent to each other. And then I measure them up. And I want them to be the same length as tail and flash. I'm trying to keep everything to the same length and trim them up. And then what I'm going to do is a little bit of prep at the tie-in end for the hackle. So you can see here, what I'm going to do is 2 things. I'm going to take my scissors and just trim about 1/8 of an inch. So I get that little comb-like bit here that's going to help hold this hackle very nice on the shank. And then take the other one, pull the fibers back a little bit, and then again, do the same thing, trim, and trim. Okay, the next thing, I'm going to take the hackle, I'm going to line it up with the tail of the fly, and gonna have to move the thread forward a little bit. And make sure that it's in the right spot. Line up the stem of the hackle. This is the only sort of delicate moment. Line this up properly with the shank and tie it on. And if all goes well, you've got one side done. Now you want to take the other side, and I'm going to turn this so I can see what I'm doing. If you're very good at this, you could do it blindly on the side opposite you. Put the hackle on the shank and take a good look, make sure that it's lining up with the other side. So the two hackles come together at the same point in the back. And then attach this with a few turns of thread. And if everything goes well, you've got two perfectly matched hackles on the two sides of the string. Okay. Let's say I'm satisfied at this point, and I bring my thread back. Now I'm going to put a little color of red. It's just a splash of color. And here again, you have choices. Today I'm going to use some Hackle just because I happen to have some of this. I got myself one of these bugger packs in red, and it's got a lot of small Hackle here that works well for this purpose. You can also use, if you like frits and things like that, blob material, that's going to work as well. And here the same thing. This is an already prepared Hackle. As you can see, the tip's been trimmed already for tie-in. And I want to tie this a little bit wet style. So I'm going to attach it here. And then it's a bit overkill. I'm going to use Hackle pliers here, but this is fairly slippery customer, this Hackle here. And the reason I like the Hackle pliers is because they'll allow me to pull back the Hackle fibers as I wind, and it'll give me a little bit better control over that. Okay, so 2-3 turns of this stuff. Want to, sometimes it's, you end up with some stray fibers here. And this is really dry fly quality Hackle. It's kind of funny. And it's pretty spiky. I suppose that's nice because it would, like the head that Dave just tied on his streamer, this would be pretty effective at pushing some water around. Here I'm going for a fairly bushy business. Okay, so once you're happy with that, couple of turns of thread, then move the thread in front, another couple of turns there, then just trim the Hackle. That is not the intended effect. There. Now I'm going to pull on these a little bit more. Give them a little bit. I don't want this to stand up too much. I'm going to go back a few turns. Push it back a little bit. And then to finish off the fly, I'm going to take a little bit of Crystal Flash I have here some old kind of green peacocky colored crystal chenille, sorry, not crystal flash. And with this, that's not the best. Just pull a few fibers off the core so that you expose the core for tying in. And this one is not. It's kind of the core unravels at the same time. You can just use peacock herl and be done with it. It's going to be much neater. But this one is a little bit bulkier, and if you want that little bulk and color at the head, it's a pretty good choice. Okay. So take this, and even with crystal chenille like this, I like to pull the fibers back a little bit because I end up with what I think is a little neater head and doesn't end up overcrowding my eye. There you go. Something like this. Couple of strands of thread, maybe 3 here. Since we're trying to finish this fly off. And notice that it's possible to keep your chenille on a card like this. It fits in the palm of your hand. So you don't really have to cut anything. You just use as much as you need to use. And then you only cut it off when you're done with it. So less of a mess, less waste. And there's the head of the fly done. Then untwist the bobbin a little bit before doing the whip finish. This will flatten out the thread a little bit. Do one. And then the second one. To whip finishes, no need for glue. An exception to that is when you go and do pike flies, then I always put a little bit of Sally Hansen's at the head. And that's a small version of this fly. This would be a couple of inches kind of size. I felt that maybe for targeting the same fish, same smallmouth bass in nearby Elk Lake, something smaller might work better than something bigger. So that's the fly. Now, if you're going to pike size this, what I'm doing is I'm using 2/0 saltwater hooks. I'm using larger hackles like these. And otherwise the materials are the same, longer. And instead of hackle, although hackle works as well to give that splash of color, you want obviously a larger size. I find that those, what are they called? Polar chenille or Fritz-like things with longer fibers do very good and very resilient colors. The feathers are surprisingly resilient for pike fishing as well. The same streamer can also be adapted for stream fishing or even for fishing in weedier bits, but in a lake, I find that to be a little less important by adding dumbbells to flip the fly over, or you can add bead chain eyes to flip the fly over. Okay, you would be doing the dumbbell eyes. One way to do it is you build a streamer this way. You put the dumbbells either after you put the feathers in and before you do the collar and the head of the fly. And there I don't bother with an extra material for the head. I just do a hot color for the color of the fly. So you can choose to put the dumbbell eyes either before or after you put the collar on, but I find that it's easier. You do the whole streamer up to putting on the feathers, then you put your eyes on, and then you take your flashy material and you build a collar, and then you work that out in through the eyes and in front of them to give both a collar and the head of the fly, out of which the eyes will stick out a little bit. And that's handy to have when you're, let's say, trying to fish in a stream, shallower water, and you don't want to snag all the rocks on the bottom. You'd go with the bead chain eyes if you want to use this in a weedy patch where you don't want the fly to sink too much, you know. So depending on current speed and stuff like that, you can choose one or the other. So it's it's a fairly simple idea that can be varied in many different ways to work in many different situations. So that's that. That's my fly for today.
Very nice, Florin.
Yeah, good job.
Have you used that fly on Elk Lake at all?
I have, and I'm not going to jump to conclusions because I went out there on Thursday to I'm looking on my now secrets will be revealed day, so you can stop the recording, right?
Well, just taking a sec before we go. I would just want to have a little toast to Michael Dell, longtime fit friend, fly fisher, and friend to fish. May he rest in peace.
Cheers.
Oh,
He's one of the good ones.
oh, sorry to hear that.
Passed away Friday.
Oh, no.
So I will stop the recording now.
Mhm.
Where are we here? Good point.
So here's the long answer to Mohammed.